We have stuff for the head, the intellectual curiosity, the lifelong learning, the imagination, the life of the mind. We have stuff for the hands, like the makerspace I just talked about. Certainly, we have information on health, and people are able to use the library to hold workshops on health-related issues. And then, at the heart of it all is this idea that we need a place where we can all be and where we can all learn and grow and be together. And that's the public library. We have I think a once in a generation opportunity to create a sustainable and thriving library system for now and for decades to come and beyond through this library district. So it's a way of, I think, thinking ahead and investing in the future of Boulder.
Hello, Boulder and the wider world. This is the Sharing Boulder podcast. My name is Philip Ogren, and for episode 21, I spoke with Sam Fuqua about the proposed library district for the Boulder Public Library System. Sam Fuqua was a member of the Boulder Library Commission for 5 years, was an elected member of the BVSD School Board of Education for 8 years, and worked at KGNU for 20 years as news director and station manager. He is now helping with an organization called the Boulder Library Champions, which is spearheading an effort to change the governance of the library to a library district model. This is a common way that libraries are governed and funded in Colorado. The proposed library district will be a new district that encompasses the city of Boulder, Gun Barrel, Niwot, Eldorado Springs, among other areas of Boulder County that are adjacent to the city, including areas to the west such as Sunshine Canyon and Jamestown. The library system is currently funded by the City of Boulder's general budget, which is subject to the fluctuations of a revenue model that is based on sales tax, and so the library's budget must continuously compete with other city departments every year. In contrast, the library district will be funded by a new property tax that will provide a more stable funding model with increased funds to provide better staffing, services, and facilities. After the interview was over, Sam expressed concern that many of the details of the proposed library district have yet to be finalized and may still change substantially between now and when we vote on the tax increase in November. For the latest developments on the library district proposal, please visit boulderlibrarychampions.org. We hope you enjoyed this interview with Sam Fuqua and that you will consider supporting our great library system here in Boulder.
Hi, Sam. Welcome to Sharing Boulder. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. Do you mind introducing yourself?
Not at all, Philip. Thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it. My name's Sam Fuqua. I am a 31-year resident of Boulder. Moved here in 1991, and some people, if they recognize the name, it's probably because either of KGNU, where I worked for 20 years on the staff as the news director and then the station manager, or it may be because I was an elected member of the Boulder Valley School District's board, the Board of Education here in Boulder for 8 years. Did that from 2011 to 2019. But why I'm speaking to you today is I'm a lifelong lover of libraries and part of a group called the Boulder Library Champions, which is working to promote the formation of a library district for our library system.
Well, thank you for all your service to the community. I really appreciate it. You mentioned when we were talking beforehand that you have a podcast. You want to just mention that real quick?
So one of the things I'm doing now is I do a podcast called Well, That Went Sideways, which explores conflict resolution broadly defined. We have many areas of conflict in our lives or potential conflict. And so we try to talk to a broad cross-section, very diverse group of guests about different areas of conflict and how we think about them, how we talk about them, and how we try to work through conflict. So it's on the web at sidewayspod.org or on all your podcast streaming platforms.
Great.
Thanks.
Well, I'll put that in the show notes so that people
Okay.
can find it easily.
Appreciate it.
That's great. That sounds interesting. Okay, well, we're here today because the library has been in the local news a lot. There's a proposal to create a library district. And so we want to kind of dive in and untangle what all that means so that people feel informed about it. But maybe we should just start off by maybe give us a brief state of of Boulder's library system as it is now, and what we love about it, and what needs changing.
Yeah, well, there's a lot to love about it. And one thing I should have said at the top is I also was a member of the Library Commission in Boulder from 2007 to 2012. And so that's when I got particularly sensitized to the funding challenges of the library system and the idea that a district model would be much more sustainable. But the library is, in a nutshell, has been asked to do more with less for many years. And this goes back to when I was on the Library Commission, and even before that. It's part of, I think, a larger problem with the city budget, that the cost to provide services in our city has been rising faster than the revenues. And this has been going on for 20 years and creates some really challenging budget problems for the city. The library, as late as 2019, was operating at essentially 2002 funding levels, and the staffing has been flat or declining, depending on what analysis you read, for 20 years. And the library is about 3% of the city's budget, but for example, just during the COVID budget crisis, the library took 20% of the permanent cuts. So in a general fund budget model that's dependent on sales tax revenue that goes up and goes down with fluctuations in the economy, whether it's a recession or a pandemic, when it goes down, the library is first on the chopping block. And at one level, that's understandable when you're asking the library to compete with essential city services like
snow plowing.
Yeah, snow plowing. That the library is going to be cut. But I guess I switched the question around there, Philip. I talked about the problem before I talked about the greatness of the library system.
Yeah, let's praise the library for a minute.
Yeah, I mean, we've got demand for materials going up, attendance at programs going up, and it is a true 21st century library. There are the books, of course, that everybody knows libraries for, and the books will always be there. The pleasure of reading a book has not gone away I think for most of us. Some of us may read them on tablets now, and the library has a very active and popular ebook checkout system. So if you're not a physical book reader anymore, I, for example, got a Kindle when my eyesight started to get worse, and I like that I can increase the font on the Kindle. It makes it easier to read. Library offers both those methods of book reading as well as audio books. It has an incredible children's program. You can go to the children's library at Maine or one of the smaller branch libraries, and there's always excited kids in there with their parents, checking out stacks of books. This is one of my memories as a child, going to my local library where I grew up with my mom and coming away with a stack of books, and how exciting that is to be engaged in and introduced to reading. We are so blessed to have a very high quality children's library program in our system. The in-person librarians reading stories, the story time, which they very creatively moved online during the pandemic. They've been doing that in person again, and it's wonderful to go into the main library and see a story time in process. So that's another thing that I think our library does really well. We also serve our homebound seniors with home delivery of books, convenient way for them to get books from the library when they can't, get down to the library themselves. We have wonderful programs in the Canyon Auditorium on the north side of the main library. Music, dance, film, a great cultural resource for the community. We have had for, gosh, over 35 years, an incredible adult literacy program called Boulder Reads, where folks who may be learning English as a second language, and folks who grew up here in America speaking English, but never, for various reasons, quite learned to read very well. This is a program for adults who are paired with buddies, with tutors, with folks who can help them improve their literacy skills. It's been going on for, like I said, over 35 years, and hundreds and hundreds of our community members have benefited from that program. So other things that I think the library is doing really well include the maker space that's relatively new, just in the past few years. They took what had been a kind of behind the scenes workspace behind the auditorium there at the main library, and they created Building 61, which is this incredible community resource where you can go, you can learn how to sew and use their sewing machines. If you want to learn how to woodwork, or you're a woodworker, but you don't necessarily want to invest in some of the more expensive or specialty equipment, you can go there and do woodworking. I just signed up for a welding class because I have a little project at my house where I need to do some welding. I don't know how to do that, but I'm going to learn at the Building 61 makerspace. And it's all free, and I think at the bedrock of why I love the library is because of that, Philip, because it's one of these, I think, essential free public services that a democratic society needs to maintain, I think, a level of support for what I think of as the common good. The library is free and accessible to everybody. Whether you're someone who has no money, maybe unhoused, someone who is a multimillionaire, the library is open to you and there to serve you with all the great programs I just talked about, and several more that we could talk about as well. So I think that's what the library is doing really well, just being a free resource for the entire community. I just was reading something about 4-H, that it's a youth development program, tends to be focused on rural areas. Have you heard of 4-H? And they have this thing like, it's 4 H's on a clover, and it's health, hands, head, and heart. And I love that. And I think the library has all that. We have stuff for the head, the intellectual curiosity, the lifelong learning, the imagination, the life of the mind. We have stuff for the hands, like the makerspace I just talked about. Certainly we have information on health, and people are able to use the library to hold workshops on health-related issues. And then, at the heart of it all is this idea that we need a place where we can all be, and where we can all learn and grow and be together. And that's the public library. So I was thinking about, gosh, I wish 4-H we could adopt that somehow as a library slogan.
I love it. Yeah, well, I can tell you love the library, man.
Yeah, I do.
That's awesome. Well, I do too.
Do you use the library?
Lately, like during the pandemic, I haven't used it so much, but it does have this one particular use case for me that I find helpful, and when I need to print something, because I don't have a printer. And I'm just so thankful that I've got a library within walking distance of my house that I can go down and get something printed. I'm kind of blown away by all the programs you just rattled off, because I didn't know about them. It makes me feel proud to know we have like a literacy program for adults at the library. It reminds me of Intercambio, which is a program for teaching English to English teachers. I used to volunteer with them. Fantastic program. And the thing about the Building 61 or area Building 61, I didn't know about that either. That is something I'd like to know more about, because I don't know. There's a lot of things I don't know how to do. Like I can imagine maybe, do they ever have a class for like soldering electronics? Like I sometimes have Yeah.
They do. And I should say, I'm not sure when this podcast is going to be out, but going on right now, and I think continuing into March at least, the gallery space it's called the Canyon Gallery. So it's that space when you walk into the main library on the north side, where the auditorium is. There's that gallery. There's an exhibit right now that is all things that were made entirely or in part in that makerspace, Building 61. So
Oh,
you can
nice.
go and see, like, this really, I just went last week, fabulous, wood creations, textile creations, use of metal and glass and other materials. I mean, it's amazing, and it kind of can give you a sense of what you can create in that space. So I encourage everybody to
That's
check that
cool.
out.
Well, and they have such great gallery space too for art, and I've gone through there many times and just been blown away and really emotionally impacted by what's been on display there in the art gallery. And of course, the downtown branch is such a special place architecturally, and the way it fits in with the creek and the whole surrounding, civic area down there. Just what a beautiful civic space for people to gather and to, yeah.
I know, and it is one of the most popular places downtown. So if we're interested in supporting the downtown core, I think supporting the library is a critical piece of that. I like you have not gone down to the library nearly as much during the pandemic, but every time I go in, I just feel good. And particularly if you go upstairs to the second story, there was a renovation about, I guess it's 5-6 years ago, something like that now, that really opened up that second floor. So that beautiful glass design at the top is really showcased. You walk up those stairs and you just
Nice.
go, oh my God, the light and the openness.
I don't think I've seen that. I've actually used the Meadows branch and the George Reynolds branches a lot more, because they've just been in near where I've lived.
Yeah.
And I think one reason I maybe go a little less is because my kids aren't really at that sort of magical age of like 6 to 11 anymore. And so I don't take my kids to libraries often. But one thing I remember about the George Reynolds branch is that there was always things going on there too. Not necessarily run by the library, but community space that other organizations would come in and
Yeah.
do whatever they do. And I mean, what a gift to the community to have spaces like that.
Yeah, well, thank you for mentioning that, because that's another piece of what I think the library does really well. It opens its doors and makes its meeting spaces available to members of the community. You could walk into the branches or the main any given day or evening, and people could be meeting about all manner of things. And that's something that is in short supply in our community, I think, is public meeting space. And so the library plays a crucial role there. I know that, I've lived up in North Boulder for 30 years, and we have lacked much in the way of public space. We do have a little corner branch there at Yarmouth and North Broadway that's been really successful and highly used, even though it's tiny. And we are enthusiastic about the fact that there is a full community center North Boulder branch coming, that will have some meeting space as well as all the resources for the community. There'll be, internet access. That space where the North Boulder branch is to be built adjoins Boulder Meadows, the city's largest mobile home park. We know that there are kids who need a place to come and study, who need internet access, and super excited about, that possibility up in my neighborhood.
That's awesome. Well, I hope that all transpires soon.
Yeah, well, with a library district, it will. The issue now within the city has been there's money to build this North Boulder branch, and the land was donated like in the 90s for it. And now there's money to construct it. But as we come back to my point about the city budget ups and downs and the cuts to the library budget, we're struggling to find the money to operate it under this, municipal general fund budget model. So with the library district, not only can we provide full service at Main Library and the existing Reynolds and Meadows branches, but we can also reopen Carnegie Library, whose hours have been sharply curtailed due to budget concerns. That's our repository of Boulder history.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask you before we dove into the district to maybe just highlight the Carnegie branch and explain what that is.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that is the original public library of Boulder. A guy named Andrew Carnegie, who was a steel magnate, one of the very, very wealthy men who built infrastructure in the country and made tons of money off of it in the 19th century. He had a program where he would give money to create public libraries in cities across the country. And so that's called the Carnegie Library because he donated the money. But as Boulder grew and they developed a main library and later other branches, that became just focused on the history of Boulder. And it really is the place where the history of Boulder is maintained. We're really fortunate to have just a little ways away, the Museum of Boulder, our relatively new historical museum for our community. But we also have a real treasure in Carnegie, where there are archives about, all the people and the events that made this city, for better and for worse. It's all there at Carnegie, and we really haven't had the money within the library system to offer much public access to that. It's not like completely closed, but it's kind of a
a place like that is super important to the identity of a city. I know that I was politically involved with the Bedrooms Are for People campaign, and Eric Budd and others were trying to figure out just exactly how the occupancy rules came about, and when they were what the context was that those came about in, and actually just understanding what year they were implemented. And so that library has those kinds of answers available. You can go through the newspapers. I'm not sure if they're on microfiche or if they're all digital or how those are accessible, but that you can't look up the Daily Camera issue, editions from 1970, for example, on the internet, just from your laptop. That's something where you go, as far as I know, that's something where you go to the Carnegie branch and do the research there. So hopefully that'll expand so that you can get more of that information online, but it still requires like a staff and a place where that all happens. So cool.
Yeah, that's Carnegie, and I, when we're hopeful that with the passage of the library district, we can fully fund the new branch in North Boulder, and also in the plan with sustainable funding under the library district would be a branch in Gun Barrel, a small branch initially out in Gun Barrel, because that's a part of the city that doesn't currently have
that's underserved
for library service. Yeah.
Cool. Well, hey, let's dive into the library district that's been in the news a fair bit, and I keep seeing it in my Twitter feed. And I've read an article or two, but let's just assume that give me an introduction to the library district proposal and how it works and why we need it.
I think I talked initially about the current model, the general fund, the ups and downs of sales tax revenue, and the fact that the library has to compete with other essential city services. So the district model is the model that most of the larger library systems in Colorado have moved to. It's a very popular model around the country as well, but in Fort Collins and Larimer County, they developed the Larimer County Library District. They have a library district in Pueblo. Douglas County has a very good library district, as does Adams County. I think it's called the Rangeview Library District. It's better known as the Anythink Libraries. All these are districts which are a independent entity created by whatever boundary the local government and voters approve. And within that boundary, people are assessed a specific mill in their property taxes that funds the library district and only the library district. So it's a sustainable, dedicated source of funding. The governance model is independent from the municipality and the county, but not completely. So for example, the Boulder City Council would appoint the trustees of the Boulder Library District, should voters approve that. So there's still a connection to the municipal government in that way through the appointment of the trustees, but the trustees then operate independently and are the governing body of the library district. And they are accountable, however, through the city council and their appointments. The other key piece of this library district proposal is that it expands out beyond just the city limits of Boulder. About a third.
That was my first question. Is what's the
boundary? Yeah. So, and the boundary is still, the details of the boundary could still change as the city of Boulder and Boulder County negotiate that. There's a as we're recording this, there was a city council study session last week about this, and some of the unresolved issues around that included what the formal boundaries of the library district will be, and the county commissioners need to weigh in on that. But the boundary as proposed extends out, includes the entire city limits, and extends out into unincorporated areas of the county around that. It does not include, well, for example, it goes up to the west into the foothills, but it does not include Nederland. Nederland has its own library district. It expands out to the south and east up to, but not including Superior and Louisville. Louisville has its own library system, and Superior has an arrangement with Louisville for its residents to use that library system.
El Dorado Springs?
El Dorado Springs is included, as I think, in the current map. And then going out northeast to take in not only the part of Gun Barrel that's already in the city, but the unincorporated parts of Gun Barrel, and extending up to Niwot and including Niwot in that. So we had some analysis of library usage showing that about a third of the Boulder Library patrons are folks who live in these nearby but outside the city limits parts of the county. And so there's an argument to be made to include them in the funding of the library district. But the district boundaries aren't totally locked down yet. And there's also some, I think, understandable concern that for folks who lost their homes in the Marshall Fire and whose property was included in the proposed boundaries of the district, that we need to find a way potentially to address, at least on the short term, the impact to those folks. As I said before, the actual town of Superior and town of Louisville were not included in the district, but we know that the fire impacted some folks who were in unincorporated parts of the county as well. And so there's a need to look at whether there's some grants or some other way to provide some near-term property tax relief for the homeowners who are impacted by the Marshall Fire, who are also in the boundaries of this proposed district, if you follow me.
Yeah, totally. That makes sense. So,
and then the other part, just to conclude the thought on kind of unresolved issues, I think there's this whole other part of the process that is the money that would be freed up in the city of Boulder's general fund budget. If a library district is created and then becomes an independently funded entity of its own, there's $9 or $10 million in the general fund that had been going to the libraries that is now available for other uses. So that was the other thing that council talked about in their study session in early February, was a public process for prioritizing in a general way where that money might be redistributed.
Yeah, so okay, so the library district is, I mean, kind of the main thing, right, is a new tax for a new boundary district, you know, on some map somewhere.
Yeah.
What's the target revenue that you want that they want to collect? And I assume it's just a property tax that's tagged on
Yeah,
to.
it's a property tax of up to, I think it's 3.8 mils, which equates to, I think, somewhere between 19 and $20 million
Yeah,
annually.
I see you waving your hands. People always wave their hands when
Yes.
when someone
Sorry.
says tax
Well,
bills,
I
whatever
should
that
be,
means.
yeah. Depending on, I think, the assessed values at the time and whether that mill is 3.8 or 3.7, but the target is to generate 19 to $20 million from that property tax increase. And that amounts to roughly $200 a year extra for a home valued at $850,000 within the city limits of Boulder. So you can do the math on, you know, what your home's assessed value and, you know, what your home is worth, and based on that metric I just gave of about $200 a year for a home worth $850,000.
And then is that sorry to ask such a basic question, but is that just for residential properties, and would that include like apartment buildings? And
It does, yeah. It includes commercial property as well.
okay.
The changes in the boy, we probably don't want to go here, but you know, the Gallagher Amendment, yeah, which fixed the ratio of commercial to residential property taxes, and voters undid that in the last recent election. So that's going to create some, I think, property tax relief for businesses, but they, you know, they would be, their property tax would go up within the library district as well. And of course, if you're a renter, you know, whoever owns the space you're renting would have a property tax increase, and that's probably passed on to you as the tenant. So, you know, everybody pays one way or another.
Yeah, great. Well, so just to be clear, you were saying a minute ago that this would free up $9 to $10 million of revenue for the city, and the library district's going to raise 19 to 20 million dollars. So that's a big bump in budget for the library, that sounds great. Yeah,
and it is great. And one thing I haven't said yet is there's 2 or 3 million in deferred maintenance that's been building up at the libraries over the years, as there just hasn't been money in the city budget to maintain the facilities at an appropriate level. And it's not that anything is unsafe, but there's, you know, the things that you should be doing to maintain your buildings that you defer because you don't have the money to do it. So there's 2 or 3 million in deferred maintenance. This library district and this budget of 19 to 20 million would enable the library to address those needs, as well as I said before, fully fund the existing main library and the Reynolds and Meadows branches and the Carney.
Probably ramp up some of the staffing, which has been
get the
understaffed for a long time.
And this is and of course the North Boulder Community Center branch library, the satellite library in Gun Barrel, all that becomes possible with what would be a significant funding increase, but it's a necessary one in my view, and the view of the folks who have studied the issue. You know, a lot of people started looking at this district issue very skeptical, but once you look into it, once you see that how well it works in other parts of the state and the country, and you know, once you do the math, you see that it really is the sustainable way to ensure a great future for our libraries. I mean, I really believe that, Philip, and I think anybody who has studied it sees that it's a better model. Now, folks who are skeptical will perhaps say, well, we can fight for more general fund dollars in the city budget. And we can do that. And the city council has at times, recognized that the library got the short end of the stick in the last budget cycle and boosted it back up somewhat, but it's never been fully funded really for 20 years. And of course, the next recession, when sales tax revenues take a dive again, the library is going to have to take.
There's also an aspect
again.
of it of like the city council has a lot to work on. We have declared a climate emergency, and we have a housing crisis, and there's all kinds of things that, transportation, there's all kinds of things they need to be focusing on. So it'd be nice to just take that off their plate and say, hey, this thing is going to be on autopilot from your perspective on a sustainably, financially solvent model. I think that's awesome.
The other, and I just to say the other, I think issue that has some people maybe holding back from their support is what happens to these buildings. Those are ours, quote unquote. Well, it depends on what you mean by ours. You mean like property of the city of Boulder, or ours as community residents and taxpayers?
So can I just clarify? You mean like the actual ownership of like the downtown branch?
Yeah.
It could transfer ownership to the library district instead of the city currently owns it.
That's absolutely right. So, and how do you convey those buildings to the library district? It's you could give them, say, okay, this is your property now, library district. You could also do a long-term lease, for a nominal amount. You could even, for $1 a year, but they're technically being leased from the city to the library district. It's a detail that can be worked out.
But I mean, to me, it just seems like a kind of a technical detail. But is there actually like are people actually upset about this?
Well, I think that's one of the questions that was originally raised by people who were skeptical, and it's part of, I think, a broader reluctance on the part of some to give up control. I mean, I think that's kind of ultimately where some of the opposition that I have heard and read.
You never give away pieces of your kingdom, if you're in charge, I suppose.
And I think the status quo is one of the most powerful forces in politics.
Oh, for sure.
Generally. Yeah. So you have to overcome that. And what I say to people is, well, we're not. What do you mean when you say giving up control? Does that mean perhaps you as a member of city council have less control? Does it mean that you think that by creating a library district, the people of Boulder and unincorporated Boulder County somehow won't have control? Because they will, and the governance model is these appointed trustees. The city still has a role in that because they're the ones who appoint the trustees. Any tax increase, of course, has to be put before the voters in the impacted area, in this case, the library district. So there's a high degree of citizen resident control, and there's I think a pretty clear chain of how that control is realized. So I think it's
that's a detail worth just amplifying a little bit. Is this if all goes well according to what's the organization called? Library Champions?
Yeah, it's the Boulder Library Champions.
Boulder Library Champions. If they can put this all together, it's going to be on the ballot, and we'll vote for it in November. Is that right?
Yes. The city and the county need to. They're moving towards, I think, creating a library district by joint resolution, meaning majority of city council does that with the support of the county commissioners.
So that means no petition drive. Is that
right?
Kind of yeah.
That's right. The Library Champions had started one pre-pandemic, and we were prepared to go that route if we had to. But fortunately, we have a terrific support from the current city council, very strong support, and I'm personally grateful for that. So that means if the district is created by a resolution, then really the question put to the voters is, do you support that, and do you approve raising your property taxes to fund it?
So you said that city council is supportive. Do you think they would vote 9-0 on this, or are there any detractors?
I think I haven't spoken directly to any city council member. This is based on my viewing of the study session in early February. It seemed like the majority of the council was supportive. Council member Bob Yates has been a pretty consistent critic of the idea. So I'm not sure that Bob Yates would vote in favor of that. Councilmember Mark Wallach seemed pretty skeptical during the study session. I'm not sure of his support one way or the other, and I don't.
Yeah, I guess unless they vote or they come out and say they're going to vote one way or another. I mean, they're supposed to be skeptical in a study session, I suppose. Perhaps.
Yeah, I would say.
So.
And that's not to say that the supportive ones weren't skeptical as well. They
Yeah.
asked good questions, that trying to better understand it. But I feel, based on the fact that the library champions quizzed the candidates before the last election, and then my viewing of the study session the other night, you've got most council members in favor, and a couple that may not be in favor.
Well, I want to circle back on, you mentioned a couple things that detractors might talk about. There's the transfer of the buildings, there's increased taxes. I kind of assume that Boulder County and Boulder City property taxes aren't spectacularly high to begin with. But of course, anytime you raise property taxes or any taxes, there's always people upset about that. But are there other issues, like arguments against the library district that an informed voter ought to know about?
Yeah, I think really, I think we've really covered the primary ones, which are, it is a property tax increase, and so that has a financial impact. And then people worry, I think, in my view, unnecessarily about somehow giving up control from the city perspective. But hopefully we've talked folks through that with the explanation of the governance, board of trustees appointed by the city. And I think in some ways that's a more direct accountability, because right now the library, like every entity within the city of Boulder, the buck stops with the city council. Here you'll have an independent body, these trustees of the library district, who will be your direct connection to the governance of the library system. Those are really the primary opposition concerns that I've heard, Philip.
Okay. Well, it sounds like a slam dunk to me. I really hope that that whatever planning needs to go into getting this on the ballot for November all unfolds smoothly. It just seems like such a great way to bolster up this institution that we really love and care about.
Yeah, and I think this is, I don't know if this is necessarily an opponent's argument, but the final thing I would address is we have a really good library system now, and so people would ask, well, why do we need to tax ourselves and make this change? And we have a really good library system because we have an incredibly hardworking library staff that has gone, I think, above and beyond during the pandemic, as many people have, to keep the service going the best possible level. But as we've talked about, they're really stretched. There isn't the level of staffing that there was 20 years ago when you look at budget and FTE, and certainly when you look at demand for service, which has steadily increased. But I recognize that the library is doing a really good job with less resources and increased demand. I don't.
So I have a kind of question coming in from the other side is sort of like, well, why is it taking us so long to get to here, where we're thinking about a library district, if all these other library districts exist and they've been successful? What's going on in Boulder that we're slow to this game?
Well, yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think it's partly that the people who love libraries and want to advocate for them are introverts. That's definitely me. And putting ourselves out there and being vocal is
they're less likely to be billionaires, perhaps. With
well,
the
yeah,
political agenda. I don't know.
Yeah, there's that, but also just maybe partly the personalities of the people who really love libraries. I think also it's just that when I was on the library commission, we at least a couple of library commissioners, myself included, advocated for a district. I know it was talked about before that, probably going back as far as the 1990s, but it competes with many other priorities, obviously, in this for people's time and attention and funds. I think a couple of things that really moved it forward in recent years is the hiring of David Farnan as the library director. He's been on the job, I think, for 8 years now, and I believe that part of his work plan when he was hired was to look into the library district option. So I credit the city for putting that on his plate at that time. And so that has helped. We have a strong and creative leader who has been an advocate for this as a possibility for our library system. And then we had a library commission that really took the lead on it. Johnny Teeter, who's now a former library commissioner, Juana Gomez, members of the commission who saw that the district was really the way to go and got people organized.
So I guess if you really wanted to geek out on this, you could go read their report on.
Yes. Oh yeah, I definitely see.
Yeah.
You can search on Boulder Library Champions and you'll get to our website. There's tons of information. I encourage people to
so that's my next question is how can you help? What can someone like me do?
Thanks for asking. I would say go to Library Champions, sign up to receive the newsletter, add your name to the list of endorsers, and then there'll be opportunities. Certainly there's opportunities to give money to help the campaign. And there also will be opportunities to volunteer as we plan to spend the summer and the fall doing as much outreach as we possibly can do to educate people about the benefits of the district in advance of the November vote.
Awesome. Well, this is all very exciting to me. And thank you so much for coming onto the podcast. Do you have any parting thoughts you want to?
I just, I really hope people will educate themselves about it, reach out if they want more information, if they're skeptical, because I've lived in Boulder, as I said, for over 30 years now. And I think at our best, we're a compassionate city. We value the idea of making public resources, education resource, cultural resources, meeting space resources free and available to all, even people who can't afford them otherwise. We can be very compassionate in that way. We are a city that values innovation. And I would point you directly to Building 61, the makerspace, where I'm told at least a dozen patents have come out of that space, where we have these entrepreneurial types who are developing an idea, developing a business. They need a prototype, perhaps. They can't necessarily invest in all the equipment required to manufacture that. They can use the makerspace. So as a city that values innovation, I think this library district model is the way to go. As a city that thinks ahead. At our best, we have I think a once in a generation opportunity to create a sustainable and thriving library system for now and for decades to come and beyond through this library district. So it's a way of, I think, thinking ahead and investing in the future of Boulder. And I think also at our best, again, Boulder is a city that, looks at bottom line return on investment. And I think, I know that that's sometimes a way that, even including me, people get skeptical about thinking of it in terms of the language of, investment.
Increased
Yeah.
GDP or something like that.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And it's really about investing in the people in our community and giving them an opportunity to be together, to educate themselves, to meet folks they wouldn't otherwise necessarily meet, to enrich the fabric of the community, to help entrepreneurial, innovative business folks with the makerspace, as well as the many resources available for people who need to put together a resume, need to research different aspects of their work. It really speaks to, I think, a strong return on investment as well.
Yeah.
So, and then finally, if we really think we're one of the great small cities in this country, and we make some lists, and I think we're very proud, in some cases, very justifiably proud of our city. But if we are really going to be one of the great small cities in this country, we need a great library system for
Absolutely.
everybody.
Yeah, definitely.
So that would be, I guess, what I'd
100%.
just say to wrap up. And thanks again for giving me the
Yeah,
time.
no, it's I'm really motivated by understanding what this whole proposal is, and I'm really thankful that there's people like you in the world doing this hard work. And it was interesting to find out about the library director. What's his name again?
David Farnan.
Okay, David Farnan. And so yeah, just I'm just, it makes me happy when you realize that there's lots of people doing good work. And I really really hope that you have success with this campaign and these plans. So thank you so much.
Yeah, and thank you for the opportunity, and again, what you're doing for the community. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, you bet. Okay, thanks so much, Sam.
This episode of Sharing Boulder was produced by David Adamson and Philip Ogren. Sound and video editing was done by Philip Ogren. The intro music was sampled from Osladum by Gilberto Gil and is available for use under the Creative Commons Sampling Plus license. Please visit us at sharingboulder.us for show notes and previous episodes. If you enjoyed this podcast, please support us by sharing this episode with your friends and family. Keep sharing, Boulder.